Social justice warrior. It's a popular term at the moment, and though I do have a vague idea of what people tend to mean when they use it, I'm still not fully clear on the matter. You'd think that a phrase that at face value means someone that fights for social justice would be a good thing, but it seems almost exclusively to be used in a negative context. Unlike with feminists, people who the antis would refer to as SJWs rarely seem to use that label to describe themselves, which to me makes it a little unclear as to what the anti-SJWs are actually against. Antis are essentially attacking a label that they've applied themselves, a label used by the opposition to oppose, if you will. I took to the internet to try and gather up a few more solid definitions of the social justice warrior, so here are some from Urban Dictionary, Wikipedia, and everyone's current favourite person, Lazy Green. A pejorative term for an individual who repeatedly and vehemently engages in arguments on social justice on the internet, often in a shallow or not well thought out way, for the purpose of raising their own personal reputation. They are very sure to adopt stances that are correct in their social circle. An individual that is defined by their constant attacking or addressing of anything they find inappropriate, offensive, or triggering in their eyes. People that promote and address the social issues that truly matter on social media should be applauded, but social justice warriors are in a league of their own. They repeatedly bash any content, even if it's innocent, and aggressively call for the downfall of the person who carelessly offended them. An individual promoting socially progressive views, including feminism, civil rights, multiculturalism, and identity politics, carries implications of pursuing personal validation rather than deep-seated conviction and being engaged in disingenuous social justice arguments or activism to raise personal reputation, particularly aimed at those espousing views adhering to social liberalism, cultural inclusiveness, or feminism, as well as views deemed to be politically correct. SJW equals radicals using censorship, violence, defamation, pseudoscience, etc. to push a political agenda, sort of the alt-right of the left. They're all sort of vague, but some of the main themes emerging in these definitions seem to be extreme political correctness, virtue signalling, and a willingness to argue over anything without necessarily having real conviction or belief in their position. However, I think it's unwise to assume other people's intent when claiming offence. Just because you can't understand why someone might genuinely have a problem with something that you think is a non-issue, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're just kicking up a fuss to score politics points. There being other more important or real problems isn't an excuse not to listen to criticism of things on a smaller scale, and you can't possibly know the depth of someone's conviction better than they do, even if it seems shallow to you. You can say SJWs are those that will bash on anything for no reason all you want, but what if they actually have a reason and you're not listening to it because you've written them off as a social justice warrior? You don't even have to agree, just listen and maybe hold off on flinging around polarising labels just because you might not like how overly PC they sound. This is where my personal dislike of the term comes from. I follow a lot of feminists and social justice-y people that I often see getting called SJWs just for speaking politely about things that the antis disagree with. Doing this, of course, doesn't stop the original person from discussing whatever they want, but it does tar them with the notorious SJW brush that can prevent people from other camps wanting to even hear them out. I find it somewhat ironic that in this manner the same crowd that is so pro-free speech is essentially shutting people off from openness to hearing other opinions by labelling the ones that hold them as SJWs. This is the exact same behaviour that the antis claim to hate when the other side does it. It's just like when people coming from the other direction may be overly zealous with words like bigot, racist and misogynist without actually stopping to explain where they're coming from or why they feel those words may apply. Labelling people in this manner instead of actually talking to each other, I feel, can stifle real conversation and push people apart. It leaves little room for reconciliation or at the very least understanding because right from the get-go you have these terms putting people off. It seems to me that the term social justice warrior, at least in the way that I've seen it used, is inherently subjective, used to refer to anyone whose leftism or progressivism is, in the anti-SJW's eyes, too progressive. Sure, some do have specific criteria for what constitutes being an SJW, but those seem to be the minority, and I feel the whole term is getting a little redundant when you have different people using it in such different ways. I don't really have a strong conclusion here. Essentially, I think it's important not to reflexively label people with a pejorative term just because their social and/or political views are too different to yours. Also, I think it's important to explain yourself when you do want to use a certain descriptor, lest it become obsolete. I want to give a quick shout out to Hi I Think I'm Real, whose channel I recently discovered. I definitely don't agree with him on everything, but he's generally level-headed and respectful, and his series on right-wing SJWs is a really great example of someone thoroughly explaining why they think that label applies. Finally, my closing questions. How do you feel about and define the term SJW? Do you use it, and in what circumstances? Do you think it's useful in identifying extreme viewpoints, or ultimately detrimental when used to dismiss viewpoints as extreme? Please leave your thoughts in the comment section calmly and respectfully, and hopefully the discussion can continue there. Also, please consider subscribing if you enjoyed this video, as I hope to make lots more like it in the future. And in the meantime, take care. Bye. Sure, you do have some people that have